Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and in this one, we're picking up where we left off in our New Mutants campaign, and we're also revisiting an old villain that I made for my game world. And about this time every year, I dust him off and we run another game with him. I don't want to talk about him too much now, though. You'll see it unfold in the story itself. Before we get into the story, though, make sure you smash that like button. Check to see if you're still subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe you and not tell you. And leave us a comment. That helps us out with the YouTube algorithm, but we love hearing from you. We have an awesome community here, and that's thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. So, having said all that, let's get into it. The prologue is us revisiting the first time we ever saw this character. So imagine that it is the 1990s and people are Christmas shopping at the local shopping mall, and two of those characters are Powerhouse, who we've talked about a lot on my channel. He's a character who is near and dear to my heart, and his best friend, who at the time was known by the name Torch. And Powerhouse, had flight and super strength and a very familiar power set. Torch had super speed and fire powers and super intelligence and stuff like that. While they are Christmas shopping and having a good time, kind of palling around, this character shows up claiming to be the Easter Bunny. And I don't mean he is like a man in a mascot costume or something like that. This is a some sort of a biological rabbit character, and they had assumed at the time that he was maybe a mutant, kind of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, something like that. And he had an Easter basket, and he was insane. I mean, he is literally, a what do they say, as mad as a March hare, something like that. But he has these grenades, regular old grenades that he has painted like Easter eggs, and he's throwing them at Christmas shoppers. And he seems to hate Christmas. And we introduced him as kind of a joke character in a way. And so the characters deal with him. They knock him out, they turn him over to the authorities. And then year after year, every spring, we would decide to use him as a holiday themed character. And so this guy has been a reoccurring villain in my game forever, and up through last year, a lot of my same players that were in today's game, 3 out of the 4 players, remembered fighting him this time last year, right? So he's a very, very familiar character. And all of that's the prologue. That's just kind of a reminder that this guy exists. And it sort of refreshes the memory of anybody who might need it, right? Well, so then we get into the main plot of today's game. And I ran this just a few hours ago, so this is all still fresh in my memory. So it's a dark and stormy night, as they like to, start off stories. It's pouring rain outside, sheets of rain. And we've got the New Mutants at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters in Westchester in upstate New York. And it's been a little bit since we saw them. We were doing stuff pretty regularly with them. We decided to let that cool off for a minute and have a little time to breathe and take a step back and see what we wanted to do. Well, so Powerhouse, who I mentioned earlier, back when he was a teenager, is when he first met this rabbit guy, right? And every single year, this guy turns up and he's a problem with his Easter basket full of grenades. We use a pun. We call them grenades. But at any rate, there's a knock on the door, and when Powerhouse answers the door, here's this rabbit with the basket of grenades. And so we roll initiative, right? Because these guys have fought a million times before. Powerhouse is faster. He's got a gold power ring now. So he, on first round, puts a force field around the Easter basket full of grenades so that that can't be used as a weapon against either he or, now that he's in a teaching position, he's responsible for the welfare of all these students, these college kids. And so he contains the problem. And then as he's maintaining that, he just starts wailing on this rabbit guy, right? We even said he managed to knock a tooth out. And one of the other characters who is around is Bubble Girl. And Bubble Girl is a cute blonde girl who can create these spherical force fields that are just like completely invulnerable to any form of kinetic damage at all, right? So she puts the rabbit in a bubble. And Powerhouse is like, "What are you doing?" And the bubbles, by the way, it looks like, think of it like if it was summertime and you had one of those bubble wands and you blow a bubble, and you know how the bubble catches the light in such a way that it's got this kind of like rainbow, iridescent kind of a thing going on, right? That's what her bubbles look like. So it's such a specific look. He knows it's her. So he turns to her and he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "You're just beating up this cute bunny thing. And he's like, "You don't understand. Like, this is basically a member of my rogues gallery. This guy's been a problem for like 30 years now. And he's throwing grenades at people all the time and da 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 da. And she's like, she starts to kind of like calm him down. And she's like, "Well, hold on though. Did he throw a grenade at you this time? Like, why did he knock on the door or not break in, so on and so forth." And some of the other students get involved in this. And so it's kind of a cool moment in a way because we see Powerhouse, how do I want to put it? He's got all this momentum towards fighting this guy that it didn't even occur to him to not fight him. So he's like, okay, he backs off for a minute and they take the rabbit into the kitchen. And so everybody kind of gathers around, and this rabbit's at a table, and he has regeneration, which is one of the reasons he's this reoccurring villain. But he grows a new tooth. And so they're all like, "All right, why are you here?" And the rabbit says, "I know you don't want to do anything for me. I get that, but do it for my daughter who's gone missing." And so one of the students asks Powerhouse, this guy's got a daughter? And Powerhouse is like, I don't know anything about the guy because he's a lunatic. And every time you ask him even what his name is, he gives you a different answer. And so one of the kids is like, "Okay, what's your name, Rabbit?" And he says it's Harvey. And they're like, "Okay, well, why are you here?" And he says, "I've got an ex, and she and I had this daughter, um, and she's gone missing. And so my ex sent me a text message and asked me to help find her. And I don't know anything about that, but you guys are superheroes and you're obviously like more competent and powerful and stuff like that than I am because every year you beat the crap out of me. So I figured I should come to you." And he basically says, I understand that you hate me, and that's fine, but like do it for her, right? Don't do it for me. Just save the girl, because that's what you guys do, right? And so it was pretty cool because we've seen Powerhouse be, I don't want to say a goody goody exactly, but I mean, but kind of though, you know? And for the first time, he's like, man, I don't like this. You know, my gut feeling is that this is a trap or something. This is bad, you know, so on and so forth. But all the kids are like, oh, come on, man, you know, let's go save the girl. And like part of their thing is the majority of them do genuinely want to do the right thing, right? The other part of it, though, is they're also like bored and they want to go have adventures and they get frustrated that they have to be at the school and learn when they want to be out there fighting villains and stuff like that. So they're like, let's do the thing, you know. And so one of the revelations that takes place around the table here is um I can't remember which one of them it was now, but one of them said something about him being like a mutant rabbit and he's like, I'm not a mutant rabbit. And they're like, what? And he's like, I'm a were-rabbit. And by the way, fun fact, um, there was it used to be a game called Werewolf the Apocalypse. I played it a lot in the 90s. Loved that game. We've done quite a bit with that in my game world. I'm not saying like my world is not the actual world of darkness. We just kind of pillage the world of darkness for ideas and we cherry pick from it. And the stuff that we like, we use, and the stuff that we don't like, we ignore, right? But for April Fool's Day, there was this book made that was a tribe book that was supposed to go with Werewolf the Apocalypse, but it was for were-rabbits. By the way, if anybody wants a link to it, they sell the book for like $2.95, I think. But if anybody wants a link to that, I'm happy to give it to them. But that's how we built this guy, right? We drew inspiration from it. One of the things that they do in Werewolf the Apocalypse is that the were creatures have the ability, it's a form of dimension travel. So when we are converting stuff into DC heroes, which is what I use to run today's game, we give them the dimension travel power. So that allows them to go to this other realm called the Umbra. And the Umbra is kind of hard to explain, and this is not a perfect explanation by any stretch of the imagination. But think of it a little bit in very broad strokes as like the upside down from Stranger Things, right? I always imagine it as being kind of like the lighting there would be like a black light, you know, just based on the old 90s artwork that I saw of the Umbra and the colors they would use and stuff like that. There was like a lot of purple and so on and so forth. So I always imagine it as like a black light version of things. And then like let's say you have a coffee table in your living room and you sidestep into the Umbra, you are now in an alternate version of your living room, but your wooden coffee table maybe has like tree roots that are growing down into the floor. Like everything is a little closer to whatever element you would normally think of it as. So if something is metal now, it's a little more like ore than it is like processed metal, and you just so on and so forth, right? But at any rate, so the were-rabbits have this interesting ability, which is usually, as I understand it, a were-creature can enter the Umbra, and like, let's say I'm in my living room and then I sidestep into the Umbra. If I exit the Umbra, I come right back into the same living room where I just was, right? But they gave the were-rabbits this ability to jump, which I think is pun intended there since it's rabbits. So I could go to the Umbra, but then I can come out of the Umbra anywhere I want to, basically, right? As long as I think the limitation was you have to have been there before. And so this rabbit villain of ours that we were referring to as the Easter Bunny, he he takes them all into the Umbra, So then they are in this weird alternate version of the X mansion, right? But then when he opens a portal from there for them to pass through, they walk into this village that is in the Black Forest in Germany. And there's a clearing, and in the center of the village is this huge stone egg. And to use a little Dungeons and Dragons terminology, this is the holy symbol for this religion. And by the way, I'm going to kind of ruin this a little. I'm going to spoil it because it's just going to make it so much easier to explain something that otherwise might be hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around. And that is that this is a parody of a movie called The Wicker Man. So hopefully you guys are familiar with The Wicker Man. In it, Nicolas Cage is the guy who finds out his daughter is missing, and he goes to this group, and it's this cult of women, right? And they want to put him inside of this huge wicker effigy, this big statue of a man, and then they want to burn him alive as a sacrifice. So I ripped all of that off, right? And so we're replacing Nicolas Cage with this Easter Bunny guy. And so he says that his ex is the chick who runs the village. And I named everybody here after a flower. So they all have names like Lily and Rose and Daisy and stuff like that, right? Well, then the chick that runs the village, her name is Aster, which is a kind of flower. The secret that nobody knows yet, but I'm going to just say it because it's going to make this easier to comprehend, is she is basically a demigod, kind of like Hercules. How Hercules is the offspring of Zeus and a human person, right? So this chick that kind of runs this cult, her father is some human guy, right? But her mother is this goddess. And I actually have there's multiple pronunciations for this character, right? Um so well, let me scroll up here to see how is the thing spelled. So the two spellings we have here are Ostra and Eostre, right? And so the English pronunciation would be Ēostre. The Old English version, I guess, is Ēostre. And then the Germanic version, which as I understand it, should be the most accurate version, is Yostra, right? And so this is the patron deity of this cult that are all female. And so when the player characters show up, there are some female town guards, and they are first of all surprised to see the PCs, um, because it's the middle of the night in Germany, right? Um, so they're surprised, but at the same time, they knew that this bunny guy was going to show up sooner or later, right? And they were hoping that he was going to bring other males with him. And so the other males then in the party are like Brad was playing, and he has this guy who is named Axel. He is actually the son of an old villain named the Dark Lord. And so he has a lot of potential power. And some of his powers are a lot like a Black Lantern, basically, right? Where he has like dark force manipulation and some abilities like that. And so these chicks see him, and in their mind, their thing is they because the goddess that they worship is all about like fertility and childbirth and stuff like that. So I'll just say it. Their secret is basically they want to mate with these males who are outsiders, right? They want to produce um offspring then that have the powers of the father, but they are hoping the offspring are female. And then what they do with all males is sacrifice them, and they have like a giant Easter basket that's our parody of the Wicker Man, right? The wicker effigy that they burn Nicolas Cage in. They've got this big Easter basket, and they've been harvesting. They have this like tall grassy stuff, and they let it dry out over the winter, and it's all dead and it's very flammable. So now they've been reaping that stuff and filling the basket with it, right? So that they can put somebody in there and burn them. And we learn that that's what happened to this rabbit guy, and that's why the rabbit guy is insane. So the chick who was the demigod, right? Aster, she had gone out into, the world of men. She found this rabbit guy in the late 80s at a nightclub and seduced him and brought him home. And then in the book I was telling you about, the tribe book for the were-rabbits, it says that when they have kids, then you roll 1d12 for how many kids they have, that they have these huge numbers of kids. So it turns out all of the females in this village that aren't Aster are all the children of this rabbit character. They're all the daughters. And you find out that they burnt the sons, and they tried to burn the rabbit himself, but he got away because of this ability of his to sidestep into the Umbra, but he was driven insane, right? So I thought that was kind of interesting in a way that we took this character that had been kind of a villain with no real backstory or anything like that. And now we were adding a lot to it, right? We're explaining why he's insane and, so on and so forth. So I thought that was cool. Um, and then we're also, we've got the rabbit chicks, and they're hot. They all have attractiveness. They're trying to seduce the male characters, and they're doing a pretty good job, by the way. Um, my son, he plays this character, and his name is Alexander Cooper, and his mutant power is actually from the Marvel superheroes role-playing game by TSR, and his power is called Nemesis. And so his thing is that, like, if he's fighting a fire person, he might get ice powers to try to put out the fire. Or if he is fighting somebody with gravity increase, then Nemesis could be substituted for gravity um, decrease or whatever. It's the idea is it's always supposed to be the opposite of whatever's going on in the moment. So when these chicks start hitting on him, because ultimately, they want to seduce him. And by the way, and all the players saw through all that right away. Nobody was fooled for a second, which I was impressed by. But at any rate, so he's like, okay, so this chick is gonna, like, something bad is gonna happen here. So I am like selecting her as my target. What is the opposite of this? And so we gave him power reserve to increase the appropriate attributes so that he could resist seduction attempts, and it worked. So there were several moments in the game where he was kind of the one guy And that was cool because my son keeps feeling like he doesn't know what to do with this character. And he's like, well, I can't do anything in this situation, so on and so forth. In this game, he was getting a lot of spotlight time as the one guy that was like immune to whatever was going on. So that was cool. That wasn't really planned. It just happened that way, but it was awesome. And so this is one of those moments is um the guy that we've referred to as the cub, he is getting seduced. Um Axel is getting seduced. Just all the males, right, are all getting seduced. And then the one female here is Bubble Girl. And something else that we'd been doing in this game is that in the first New Mutants adventure I ran, um, the cub had been dating a girl named Nochtkind, who ironically is also from Germany. And she left him. She was Axel's sister. She broke up with her boyfriend because she had to like go find herself, basically, right? And so he has been now single for about 6 months in game time, right? So Bubble Girl has fallen in love with him, but she hasn't acted on it yet. And so now um she sees him getting like kind of seduced by these rabbit chicks because everybody in the village is a were is like a half celestial were rabbit basically, or whatever you want to call it, right? Um the offspring of the male villain guy I mentioned earlier who's a were rabbit, and then the mother is of course the chick that's a demigod. So all of their offspring are seducing the heroes because they want to have kids with them that are even more powerful rabbit themed villains, right? And then they're going to try to kill the PCs. So Nemesis is the one guy who's kind of figuring out what's going on, and he's like, hey, no, let's not do this, let's not do that. And then Bubble Girl, there's a really interesting moment where she tells one of the rabbit chicks like he's taken, and the cub kind of looks at her as like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, we're not dating, you know. So that was an interesting moment. And they end up the guards take him to Aster's house. They wake her up in the middle of the night. um she sees that sort of her long-term plan is working, which is to get the rabbit guy to come back to the village again, to bring more males, for them to breed with, so on and so forth. And so she puts him in a house for the night. She has guards watch the house, only two guards. And so then Nemesis goes out front and just stays awake all night and just stands there. So they're looking at him. And while he's doing that, Brad's character opens a window on the opposite side of the house and sneaks out and is going around the village looking for clues. And then Bubble Girl also goes and wants to look for clues. And so one of those two guards says, like you'll need an escort. So now with the only two guards doing stuff, one is walking with Bubble Girl. And as they walk, they have this conversation about how basically Bubble Girl is in love with the cub, and the guard basically says you should have already acted on that. And that was an interesting moment where it's like the guard kind of wants him for herself, but she's just saying stuff that she thinks is true, which is lines up with like her worldview. That's part of this whole fertility thing, and like sex is good, and all that stuff. So it's kind of an interesting moment where even though they're on opposite sides of the equation, the one chick is almost helping her in a way. Um, At any rate, they search for a lot of clues. They're trying to figure out where the daughter had ran off to, and they don't know. And um, while Axel is sneaking around, he ends up getting caught. They wake up more guards, so that there's a guard for every member of the party then. And so the party comes back, and an interesting moment then is Bubble Girl decides to get into bed with the cub. And then when he wakes up, um, he's surprised that she's there, and she tries to make a couple of like charisma rolls and stuff, and she's not getting great rolls. So she ends up just like kissing him finally. And so that was this whole thing where they've been kind of doing the will they won't they thing, through the campaign, and there's been kind of like a lot of near misses and stuff like this. And now they finally kiss. And it doesn't get past first base, but still. And then that kind of gives him an emotional anchor where he has more of a reason now to resist what the rabbit chicks are doing and so on and so forth. And so there's these tables. And in the morning, the Aster, who's the chick that's the demigod that is trying to how do I want to put this? So far she's been playing nice. You know what I mean? And she's like, let's all have this meal together, so on and so forth. And they actually drug the food. So the girls all go around with little things that look like Easter baskets, and they gather just normal chicken eggs, non-painted eggs. The big statue of an egg, it has carvings on it that are kind of like decorations or whatever. But the normal chicken eggs are just regular, of course. But it's all the symbols of this pagan goddess, right? So the symbols are like um springtime, eggs, rabbits, so on and so forth. A lot of the stuff that has permeated our pop culture interestingly enough this time of year. So sticking with that theme, they have eggs for breakfast, even though I know rabbits would normally not eat eggs. We said there was salad there too, but um so the rabbit villain eats the food, Powerhouse eats the food, and the cub eats the food. And almost immediately after they eat food, they start to yawn a lot. Um, and so the PCs figure out that the food has been drugged. The other PCs don't eat any. Um, and Bubble Girl uh basically calls the chick that is like a demigod or whatever, Aster. She refers to Aster as like a half demon so and so. She's like um insulting her. And so Aster basically has had enough then and says, "You know what? Fine. I'm done with this." And so she tells her daughters, her kind of army of daughters, to take them. And so we roll initiative and we finally have this fight that kind of everybody knew it was coming, and it was just a matter of when, right? And so to to make the stats for Aster, I used an old D&D book called Deities and Demigods. And so Aster herself was basically all 25s. And so that meant then if you take the stats of an average person, we assume that Aster's um mate would be all twos, and then you average that out um and round down, is what you're supposed to do in a lot of role-playing games that I play. That meant that the all of her daughters then, all of their attributes were at 13, and that's about what I wanted it to be for the party, right? So they take the rabbit villain, that we refer to as the Easter Bunny, and they go throw him in that big Easter basket on all that dead grass because they're going to burn him, right? And then they throw Powerhouse in there, and they throw the Cub in there too. And then one of the girls, like, she has the spear, she plants that in the ground, and she sort of pole vaults into the head of Axel. And one of the things that they can do is I gave him super speed, and then she kicks him in the head like a rabbit kick, like the real quick. Think of sort of like Thumper from Bambi. That's a cheesy example, but you get the idea. Or like Chung Li from Street Fighter. She manages to knock Axel out in one round. And he was shocked because he's kind of been dominating a lot of stuff so far in the campaign. So for him to go down so fast, um, really got the players' attention. And then, um, let's see, who else am I leaving out? Oh, and then Bubble Girl gets knocked out too because the rabbits were faster in initiative, because their stats are all 13s, and then you add the 4 points for martial arts and lightning reflexes, and then they have 6 APs of super speed that I gave them too to represent their rabbit, stuff. And so, you add all that up, and they were way faster than the heroes. So they're getting the jump on them. The one guy they don't get the jump on though is Nemesis. And so he decided that, because the way we do the Nemesis power in DC Heroes is we give them Omni power with the limitation that it can only be substituted for what feels like the the opposite thing at the time. And so when they go to rabbit kick him, his interpretation, and mind you, I was being a little lenient there too, because like I said, my son was frustrated with the character and felt like he couldn't do anything, so on and so forth. So I wanted to ease that some too. Because when you're a GM, not everything is actually about kind of in-game logic. Sometimes it has to be out-of-game considerations, like players feeling frustrated, or they're playing a game but they're not having fun. So I'm trying to balance all that. So I was like, you can, yeah, just substitute it for whatever you want, as long as it seems to fit the moment, and it fits your vision of the character. And so he substituted it for um uh spirit travel, self-linked. So he becomes like a ghost version of himself, basically, and then the rabbit just flies through him harmlessly. Think of like Kitty Pryde, basically, right? So they have another power called dispersal. I won't get into that because I want this to be more story than rules. But point being, so he does that, and now he's like the only one still standing of the entire party. Here's the other thing, because I said I have to balance a lot, and I need to take out of game stuff into consideration. And I've mentioned this before on the podcast. My wife, one of the reasons she loves the Linda Danvers character, who is the 90s Supergirl, right? If you're familiar with the 90s Supergirl, she was in a cult. This guy named Buzz, who was secretly a demon, tried to sacrifice her on like an altar with a dagger. He ran her through with it. He left her for dead. And then the protoplasmic matrix Supergirl showed up, and she had the ability to turn into kind of like pink slime, basically. It's kind of hard to explain, but she sort of like oozed her pink slime into the stab wound to try to plug it, basically, right? And something went wrong and they merged. And that was then the 90s Supergirl, right? Well, so my wife, the reason she loves the 90s Supergirl so much is she relates to it. And when she was younger, she got recruited into this cult. And so as we're playing this game today, my wife gets kind of triggered because a lot of this stuff is ringing a bell for her, right? And I see her getting upset out of game. And there's certain things in the game that I don't do. And my wife actually, she ran a thing with this fertility cult. Geez, I don't even know how many years ago it's been now. 10 or 15 years ago, she ran this same idea, right? And so this was actually a sequel to that. And back then, she handled it fine. So I thought it would be okay to run it. But today, she did not handle it fine. And actually, she has this thing called um, conversion disorder, where if something stresses her out, it can actually give her a stroke if it's bad enough. And so I start to kind of see some warning signs and stuff, right? And obviously that is the precedent, right? That becomes the thing more important than the in-game story. So I realize I have screwed up big time by doing this, and that just because she was okay with it way back when doesn't mean she's okay with it now. So she said, she looks at me and she's got this weird look in her eyes, and she's like, I want to bring in my Supergirl character. And I said, okay. And you could look at that and say that ruins the adventure. I don't actually think it does. Um, because she's married to Powerhouse. And she is that, 90s Earthborn Angel of Fire version of Supergirl. And these days, because there's other characters going by the name Supergirl, we just call her Earth Angel. But she's married to Powerhouse, aka the Gold Lantern. So I said that's fine. And so she had her Supergirl character, Earth Angel, shows up and starts dealing with all this stuff. She attacks Ēostre, and it was not a horrible fight, actually. She was using a lot of heat vision, and I can't remember if I said it or not already, but I gave Ēostre, like, she was basically all 25s. So like Dex 25, body 25, strength 25, all that. So when she was using 30 APs of heat vision, that was about where you wanted it to be, and she was taking her down. And then when Ēostre would hit her, um, it- you know, she was taking it like a champ. She was fine. Um, but yeah, that was it was a pretty good fight. And then Nemesis dealt with the daughters of Ēostre, defeated them. And then when Brad's character woke up, he's done this before, he's got this big fire attack where he basically goes nuclear. He just burnt down the entire village then. And he ends up burning all of these rabbit characters. Um, so in DC Heroes, they have this rule that is if you do that, you don't get any hero points. So he didn't get any points at all. He was bummed about that. And he had figured some stuff out earlier, and he had done other things where I was going to um give him extra points actually. So I was kind of sad he went that route, but he took a catastrophic irrational attraction to like having like a bad temper, like a berserker rage kind of an idea, you know what I mean? Actually, not quite that, because they do kind of have that in DC, but we didn't like the game mechanics of it. So we called it an irrational traction to anger, because then at the end of the day, he's still making the call as the player until, you know what I mean? There's a little more agency in that situation. But he decided at the end, he would rather not have any points and yeah, destroy stuff. So then we get to the epilogue. And the epilogue is that Powerhouse wakes up. Everybody's back at the X mansion, and the um the rabbit is here too. The rabbit villain is in one of the rooms. And so we see some stuff then that is some things are being resolved. Nemesis is sort of talking to everybody about like we should not kill. We should arrest, we should detain, whatever, but he's trying to go more of like a lawful good kind of a thing, or more like a Superman kind of a personality there, right? And so he's talking about that. Um, Bubble Girl and the Cub are together now, and it kind of took for the rabbit chicks to hit on the Cub for Bubble Girl to admit she'd fallen in love with him, and so those two are a couple now. Um, Earth Angel and Powerhouse are married, you know, and Earth Angel is very amorous with her husband, and she's like, you don't need those rabbit uh frollops, you know, messing with you, trying to breed with you and all this other crap. Like I will take care of you. She did that. And then the very end, the stinger or whatever is the daughter, the missing daughter that whatever, what was her deal? Um, she has one of these daggers, one of these sacrificial dagger things, and she sticks one in her dad while he's sleeping. And it's all where creatures have a weakness to a certain kind of metal. Um, I've mentioned before on the channel I used to play a werebear, and we actually took this idea from Ravenloft, which is that his metal was cold iron. In some of the Dungeons and Dragons stuff, they have werebears have a problem with cold iron rather than silver. I always thought that was cool that each one had a different metal. And then the wolves, of course, were silver and so on and so forth. So the rabbits have their own metal, and that's what this thing is made of. And she does it. The daughter does it. And so that's the end of my rabbit villain. That we ran him for 30 years from 1995 to 2025. And he never had an origin before. You know what I mean? He was just a joke. So I felt like he goes out then on this note of suddenly being tragic and having more going on, right? I wouldn't want him to be reformed. I don't think he could ever be reformed. But I thought it was interesting that we took the guy who was the joke, and when we end, he's oh, what would you say? People felt bad for him, that he'd gone crazy because they tried to sacrifice him and stuff. And then the other thing is, I almost saw it as the Twilight Zone ending, where we don't know how many of these chicks are still running around out there in the world. And they're picking up guys in bars and so on and so forth. And so this cult is going to kind of find its legs again, right? These are going to be a problem moving forward. A year from now, I guarantee these are the guys I'm going to be running an adventure about. But yeah, and then so now this new chick, I think, is even worse than her parents, arguably, because she's willing to kill her parents. Um, hopefully you get the idea. I could unpack a lot of these ideas a lot more, but this is already a pretty long video, so I'm going to wrap it up. Um, I hope, as always, that you enjoyed hearing about this. If so, and if you'd like to support our modest little channel, we would love it if you hit like, make sure you're still subscribed, and leave us a comment. Let us know if you've ever ran like holiday themed stuff, What did you do? How did you do it? I'd be curious to hear about that. And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.